Growing up, he was a very sweet child, my only child, so he didn't have any brothers or sisters, but he had lots of friends, played well, loved music. He was on a facilitator's course in Hawaii, and he was stopped at the airport in Hawaii, and they searched his bag and found something in it, and was taken by the police. And the next thing I knew was the call in the middle of the night. From the moment that I had the phone call from him, sobbing, saying he was in the police station, and the first thing was sort of a rigid shock. I just sat there. You just can't believe it. You might see it in the movies when people are told, but there it is happening, and you go cold. But it felt a pulsating, horrible sensation through you. It's the worst thing.
She was a sensitive soul, but she wanted to enjoy life, experience different things, have a laugh. She was always laughing, wasn't she?
Yeah. And for me as a child, with that growing up, Andrea was very much, the fun big sister. Yeah, she was just happy, fun, bubbly. Just had a zest for life, didn't she? Yeah. I was cooking tea at home. I remember it as clear as day, and Mark rang me, and he doesn't ring me very often, so I was a bit thinking, oh, I better take this. You all right? He said, are you sitting down? And I was like, oh my God, what's happened? Thinking the worst. Well, it really was. And he said, it's Andrea, she's been arrested. I said, what do you mean? And then he, panicking, was saying about death row and this, that and the other, and it was just, it didn't feel real, did it?
No. Mum rang me and told me and said, Andrew's been arrested for trafficking drugs from China to Indonesia. I think the biggest thing was the fact that she was alone, so far away from home, and just all alone. You just can't imagine how she felt. It must have been awful.
I'd never heard of things like a plea bargain. When the lawyer said to me, 5 to 10 years, and I went, what? For his crime here, it'd be about 2-3 years, maybe 4 years at the most, from what I've seen from other people. So I was thinking, a couple of years. And then I said, no, and we both said no. And they said, if you don't take that, it'll get longer. And I went, no, surely not. And the next thing he said, you've turned that down, it's 15 to 30. And when we actually went to the court on that day and they sentenced him with 30 years, I was on my own there. Just been wiped, both of us, and then they just took him up, handcuffed and manacled, and walked away.
It can be a huge shock for people if the sentence that's handed down is vastly greater than the sentence that perhaps they might expect someone to get in the UK for a similar offence. In some countries we are supporting somebody who might be in prison for 6 months for an offence, which could get a sentence of decades or even a life sentence or a death penalty in some other countries.
She wanted pictures of all of us, so whether having that surrounding herself with those sort of things made her feel more of home.
A lot of times people that know about my son, they'll ring up and they'll say, how am I? And they won't ask how he is. He's not dead, he's still alive, right? And so when the Prisons Abroad meetings happen, I can then discuss him, as we can all do. We all share that. If I didn't have that, the feeling of isolation and his loss, or he's not dead, but he's not here, I don't know how I'd cope with it.
What Prisons Abroad can do for families is bring them together in dedicated support groups where they are in a safe space, it's a confidential space, where they can feel able to share what they're going through with other family members, give each other tips, give each other support, and just know that they're not alone, they're not the only people going through this. Families often do need more specialist support if they've been going through imprisonment or the imprisonment of a loved one for a longer time.
Wow, there's this charity that can help, and there are other people in the same situation. And actually the best part about it, from my perspective, was that Mum didn't feel alone, and we as a family didn't feel alone, knowing that, because you automatically feel that you're being judged in a negative way when you've got a relative that's been imprisoned for doing something so tragic. But there are so many other people in the world that are in the same situation, so just being able to talk to other people and having Prisoners Abroad connecting other people was just, you know, it meant everything, didn't it?
Yeah. Coming to the meetings, I think the very first meeting you go to, you don't know what you're actually going to experience and what people are going to be like. But Prisoners Abroad, the people, they were just so welcoming. Didn't make you feel guilty for what Andrea had done. Didn't belittle you, or they just supported you. And that's what you needed at that given time.
There'll be other people in the same position as me. We don't go on about the crimes, we just talk about what's happening in our life and what our loved ones are going through and what they're experiencing, or, you know, if anybody's got any news about, you know, something happening or any difficulties with money or whatever, you know, that's just my lifeline, is here.
In some of the more recent conversations that I had with her, she was getting really low because she'd broken her wrist, so she couldn't do anything for herself, and she hated that because she'd become sort of incapable of doing day-to-day things. And one of the things that Andrea really enjoyed doing while she was there was writing letters, just doodling, drawing pictures and things, wasn't it?
Writing a diary.
Writing a diary.
Yeah.
And she couldn't do any of that anymore because her hand wasn't working. And obviously, you know, a broken wrist can heal quite quickly normally, but when you're in a situation where you're not, you know, having the healthcare that you need.
We knew Prisoners Abroad have been exceptional. We knew that they would be a massive support, not only for Andrea, but for us as a family.
As they had been over the years.
Yeah.
Prisoners Abroad also supports lots of people who are suffering a physical health issue. And if you are in prison for a long time, especially in poor conditions, such as we might see in Southeast Asia, for example, people find that there isn't the same level of hygiene, they can't keep clean as easily. Cells can be very overcrowded, so if you didn't have a medical issue before going to prison, you might be much more likely to catch something in those conditions.
Going in is lovely, leaving is not lovely. Saying that final goodbye is not lovely because you don't know. You know, I'm not young anymore. I don't know how much longer anything can happen. And we talk about that. We've been very real about things, talking about, you know, death, dying, the future. I have to cover these things. You can't ignore them. I've had to tell him on occasions, you know, family members have died, some unexpectedly. That was horrible. These things happen. So the visits are fantastic. They're costly, they're tiring, and they're very emotional. But what I do is when I'm visiting my son, I try and wear nice bright clothes, like a nice bright shirt with patterns or birds or something lovely on it, because all they see is concrete. They don't see any colour, there's nothing there.
Families might have to be coming to terms with the fact that There may be some milestones they can never celebrate as a family. That might be a birthday, it might be weddings. Families might have to realise they may never have grandchildren if their child is in prison for a number of years. And that's extraordinarily difficult for anyone to have to come to terms with, especially if they can't go and see their loved one in prison, especially if it's difficult to communicate.
With the limited calls that we have, we learnt to say, I love you at the beginning of the call in case it got cut off. The umbilical cord might be cut, but the heart cord is never cut, ever. And that's what I've said to him and other people when they've questioned me about him and they've been cruel and hurtful and judgmental. I still say I love him. I do love him, always will. There's no one else that does Prisons Abroad work like this as a charity. No one to be there. If I'm dead and he comes back, I know they'll be here for him. That's my hope for this charity. It's really vital.
You didn't realise how much Prisoners Abroad did provide for Andrea as well, because they helped her with money to be able to buy the essentials that she required actually in prison. They'd send her newsletters, they'd send her reading materials, but you could see something wasn't right from her diaries because the writing, I think, stopped in 2019, 2020. So that must have been when she started to deteriorate with her hands. But that's where Prisoners Abroad sent alternative sort of reading material rather than her having to write. So they looked at her holistically really and didn't just see her as a number, she was a person to them.
We find that our reading materials can be really valuable to people who otherwise may have no way of spending their time or staying in touch with the outside world. Prisoners Abroad can send book parcels, magazines, newspapers and our regular newsletter to help people stay busy but also feel connected to a community of lots of other people in prison around the world.
If the American government decide to transfer him or agree to transfer him to finish his sentence off here, it would be the most wonderful thing at the moment. I'm getting older, I'm in my 70s. I need to know that I could see him easier for the rest of our life, and hopefully one day he'll be free to sit and have a cup of tea.
I think we just had to make Andrea's life for the best for her, so I would always make sure she got a Christmas card. I'd always make sure she got a birthday card, so that she knew that we were thinking about her. The last birthday card I sent her, I actually wrote in it, "This will be the last birthday card I have to send you." I didn't send the last birthday card because she didn't make it.